And so the government doesn't tell people how to live their lives. They're paid to serve you. But if you get the major corporations to make the people do stuff, or else they'll hire robots, is a damning way of making everything dark. And how to make the dark twisted is make inflation and debt result everywhere, so that even the robots taking the jobs will have a bit of extra and if there's one thing the owner told me that I work for, said, never evaluate me. And so when the globe is being put as a giant game of telephone, as the world's being put as a giant game of telephone, he was ripping that ride. The name of the game, I just said it, is how well put together is your immune system to be tricked or not, coupled with how dirty is your neighbor. And they're using you to diffract the two. Those are two eyes that are literal. And so when it comes to hell having like being put in the belly of the beast, or an entrance of smashing teeth, those are two eyes at the end of that rabbit hole, starting with your immune system. How well is it put together? And so I'm not going to be evaluated like that just to be able to go outside, having to prove I'm clean and that my neighbor is. Because when garbage is taken out, it's put next to other people's garbage, and now it just combines. And so with particular placements of proteins in a domain or a terminal lodged inside of an Omicron, so the variant's hard to find, you'd be hard pressed to say that it's tricking an immune system. Or you could just write it in Scientific America and get it published. That's one thing that really hurts me as an adult, is how many things that are in books that are published that really just, miss the target and are allowed to be. How many typos are in things that are published. When I see this, it's just like, dang, that really hurts. And this is why I'm an advocate of signs, and when signs aren't followed outside and they're just thrown on the road and it's not taken seriously, that really hurts too. Just because I know that it provides like this giant gap of darkness, where if you're meant to keep inside of your house to be safe, that falls apart so quickly when you have to take your garbage out. And if the garbage is taken out, that's the worst stuff that was inside. That was the worst stuff that was inside of your house. And then it's now just out in the open air. That totally eliminates anything that you were trying to be precautious of. And that's just one thing that's great about the design of the body. The weird surface tension on stuff. If you throw a boomerang, it's so odd that it'll have an inertia that'll bring it right back to a person if you're focusing on one thing. Like on a bike, if you hold the brake and press your back wheel and you're jumping to try and stick a manual onto a ledge, you're gonna be able to hit that ledge if you're committing. And that commitment is something that bridges the gap. In science, it's called the weird surface tension or Brownian motion. And that's actually a thing that can be used not just on the micro scale, but on macro level. It's like in movies, there's not a perfect movie, but there's so many movies that are so good that they get a perfect score anyways. just because to the person watching it, it's the best movie they've ever seen. So to them, the score must be perfect. So classically, in any writings, the stories that darkness is what is used to hide, and the more that things are ugly in the dark, it's that much more damning. So when it comes to the answer is getting more and more robotics and computers, that'll be great, only that is what will dehumanize more and allow people to have less options naturally. So you see the scuffle within taking precaution. The government wants and so it's almost how like the potential of a rainbow is always like in the sky, and so just because you don't see it there doesn't mean that from some odd angle it isn't there, because there's always like thunderstorms happening on planet Earth at any given point in time. There's always like 5 or something. And so with rain being around that region, if you were to be at some point around that rainstorm, you'd be able to see a rainbow. And so more specifically, if you have like size differences and you can be really big or really small, you can have a point of inflection where the entire atmosphere everywhere would be a rainbow everywhere. That has to be true because you can be infinitely small. And so looking at that point of view, the entire atmosphere there, of which is made up of certain water molecules, has to have that. Imagine a topaz sky on Earth if you're just to like probably cut being infinitely large, you know, like you can't be infinitely large on planet Earth because it's only a definite large size. But if you were infinitely large as like a string getting tangled and tightened tighter within the ozone to have different perspectives about, is probably how why they like satellites low to the ground, so that they can put out more radiation everywhere, so that the energy of the radiation is equal just to a string being infinitely tight and long as well, infinitely long and tight, just more and more tight the more and more the radiation is stronger, which is achieved by making the satellites closer to the ground. And so having that, cutting the largeness and then having it be infinitely small in like a specific point of the atmosphere, if you double both of those, kind of like how the Omicron is doubling 2 spikes in odd places in order to make it harder for the immune system to read it, to send out the proper T cells to eliminate it. It's doing the same procedure. Instead of just making the sky from the 2 points of view being infinitely large and condensed within the ozone, or infinitely small from one point, using both of those standpoints as eyes, those are the spikes of the Omicron that tricks the immune system, and they're set in positions that the shape of the immune system makes it hard to register. Just as the shape of a rainbow, you need a specific angle to achieve. So if you're just trying to have not the entire ozone look like a whole bunch of rainbows in just one giant topaz concentration of the arc of above the land being just one fat rainbow of all the topaz around the Earth. That could never be achieved. It would have to be like, because the rainbow's a semicircle and the Earth is like a circle. And if you're just to have one rainbow, but I guess it could be achieved because being infinitely large, you're just squiggling around and condensing within the ozone. So then, you know, that's extremely hard to think about, but that's what the amino acids, how they're neutralized and not able to exit out the Omicron thing.